Well, as leaders of various African countries come together to celebrate the establishment of this day almost 6 decades ago, the problems the continent is facing will be at the top of the agenda. Malnourished children line the streets of Africa, and the constant reminder of the immense and boundless potential they hold makes nutrition an utmost necessity. Today marks the 59th year of Africa Day, and more than the beauty of the variety, the pure, unadulterated cultural phenomenon found on the continent, there is an urgent need to feed the hundreds of millions of hungry Africans, secure their future, and make the continent a food basket of the world. It's Africa Day special on VSA. Welcome, I'm Sulaiman. Well, this year's Africa Day is focused on the importance of nutrition, addressing malnutrition and food insecurity. We actually started off the week with looking at agriculture and a whole lot of things that the continent can do to get past this. Among many other problems, the challenges of food insecurity are stark on the continent. Globally reaching causes are part of these challenges, as COVID-19, climate change, and most recently, the Ukraine-Russia war has left many Africans grappling with the effects of food unavailability and, when available, exorbitant prices. African youth are being driven to be innovative to help find solutions to these challenges. The cause of violence have left marks on the continent as many war-torn countries are dealing with famine, starvation, and many other food challenges. From the east to the west and some part of southern Africa, the effects of malnutrition are threatening the future of a blessed continent. Marcus Solomon, founder Children's Resource Center, South Africa, and Robert Ndaru Mwaniki, who is a food technologist and security expert in Kenya, join me today on the program. Later on, we'll have Yinka Adewole, who's a fruits and vegetable farmer in Nigeria. So, ladies and gentlemen, good to have you here, and happy Africa Day. Now, let's start with you, Marcos. It's yet another beautiful day to celebrate Africa. Perhaps I should start by asking what the day means to you.
Well, firstly, Sulaiman, if I may call you that,
Absolutely.
I'm pleased to join you on this panel, and for me to be in Nigeria now. Yeah, and I think the theme is very appropriate for this year in celebrating Africa Day. There's much to celebrate. Unfortunately, there's also we face some very serious problems. Now, just by way of guiding me, Sulaiman, how much time do I have?
Well, all through the program, we have about 55 minutes. So we're going to have, we'll be having the back and forth conversation. I come to you, I go to Yinka as well as Robert.
Fantastic. Well, let me start by saying I'm Marcus Solomon from the Children's Resource Center in Cape Town. We started about 40 years ago, and the main mission of the organization is, and was and still is, to help children 7 to 14 build a social movement of children. The underlying philosophy is that children have agency, and we've come to accept that almost from the time, not almost, from the time they are born. Research has shown they are co-constructors of the world. And that is the basis of why we organize them, both boys and girls. South Africa has, like most countries, about 45% of its 57 million people are children. Half of those are 50-50. That's about 19 million people. Half boys, girls. Unfortunately, South Africa has a huge malnutrition problem. 4 million children are stunted. Another 10 million go hungry every day. And unfortunately, the cause of that malnutrition is a lack of food, very, very little food they get. Some children only have 1 meal a day. But another portion who have enough food, but the food they get is of very poor quality. The food industry, research has found, one of the main causes of a serious problem of obesity and other ill health problems. And it's all over the world today. Big food companies make huge profits. In the last 2-3 years of the pandemic, they have made unprecedented profits. In fact, in the last 2 years, actually as a result of huge problems right now, companies are making up to 50% profit on the products. And these are basic food items, bread, oil, etc. What we've also done, Sulaiman and fellow panelists, and of course your listeners, for the last 5 years, the Children's Resource Center has been a member of an organization called the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign. It's not about food security only. What we've discovered, and the world is beginning to adopt an approach that says we need food sovereignty. We need to have the sources of food production, land, water, etc. I just wish to add that for us, food has become more than just giving children the material they need to fill the stomachs. It also is very related to water. Water is an important part of the food production. I mean, the food that's needed for nutrition. But more importantly, food, our children need food for the heart, food for the brain, and food for the spirit.
You know, apologies that I'm butting in, Marcus. I'll come back to you because you've been able to establish something which is very key here. You've just told us that food goes beyond just a material to fill the stomach. And you've also been able to stretch it to water and nutrition. So that does matter. I'll come back to you so that we'll expatiate more. Let me come to you, Robert. You know, it's another day we are here celebrating Africa, yet we're still talking about some key concerns. A moment ago, Marcus told us about what they've been able to do in the last 40 years for children. And I know how painful it is for many Africans to see Africa being depicted with pictures of malnourished children. But again, it is what it is. People are starving in a continent that has quite a whole lot to give to its people. So let us in on what this day and its theme, mean to you as we move on with this celebration for the day.
Thank you very much, sir. My name is Robert Darwini from Kenya. I am a trained food technology and nutritionist with interest in food security, climate change, conflict resolution, and also human rights. As we celebrate Africa today, I see that we have challenges which we need to critically think about in order to overcome. For example, I look at the top factors which are contributing to food insecurity in Africa today. And identify first the climate change. There are frequent droughts, there is flooding, there are cyclones, there are wildfires, there are erratic weather patterns, and we have seen even tornadoes in Madagascar. Together with the melting of glaciers on top of our Mount Kenya and Kilimanjaro. So we must find means and ways of dealing with climate change so that we can mitigate and adapt to it, and our people can have a better future. Secondly, we have an unfavorable land tenure. The land tenure we have does not allow for large-scale farming, 5,000 to 20,000 acres, doesn't allow for high levels of mechanization, and doesn't allow for people to settle within the urban areas and reach the agricultural space for food production. Number three, we have the issue of rain-fed as opposed to irrigation. We have seen that rain for precipitation in Africa is in short and is becoming even less with desertification. So we need to adapt more technical irrigation, like drip irrigation, so that we can convert more of our lands to productivity. Fourth is finance for sustainable agriculture. We need quality seeds, we need quality and quantity fertilizers, we need cost-effective pesticides, and all other inputs. And all this calls for finance. I'm reminded that in Mozambique, the African leaders agreed to contribute in terms of budget 14% to agriculture so that all these requirements can be met. But up to today, many countries are not achieving that target. Number five is the deployment of technology. We know that we are now in 2022, and many of our colleagues in the world are using intelligence, artificial intelligence, in collecting and disputing their data. They are using drones for spraying crops. They are using machine learning, blockchain, and even digitization. So we need to adopt all of these so that we can have a better place and we can start approaching where the first world countries are in terms of food production. To add to this, we know that in a place like the Horn of Africa, today we have 5 million people facing starvation. We have seen that most of the children in northern Kenya, Somalia, South Sudan, Ethiopia, are faced by malnutrition. Indeed, they cannot access balanced diets. And 4 out of 10 children in school have stunted growth, or what we call dwarfism. So we must up our game. The food we have is not adequate. The situation has been worsened by the war in Ukraine. And right now, we have to pay very heavily for both our energy and food. And 65% of our population are involved in agriculture, but they contribute only about 25% of the GDP, according to the African Development Bank. Also, in terms of best agricultural practices, we are only at 25% compared with the developed world. So we have milestones to meet, we have challenges to address, and it's good that we are looking at where we are and where we need to go today as the Africa Day. Thank you.
Well, I think let me take this to Yinka, who is also a farmer. Yinka, thanks for your time, thanks for your patience, and again, happy Africa Day. Listening to Marcus and Robert painting a picture, it's a gloomy picture, as a picture of a bigger challenge. But again, it's a challenge that just as the AFDB President Yinka Adewole has said, it is surmountable. Africa can feed itself. So help us here, Yinka. How do you think this is going for farmers? Are they getting the right, technology and assistance or aid, from government? And how can the farmers be helped to help the continent? Well, we seem to be having a problem of getting to Yinka. Let me come quickly to Marcus. Marcus, Good to know you're still there. And listening to what Robert has also said, it comes back to some of the key things that we should be doing to ensuring that our children and our continent gets, as you rightly put it, gets the right nutrition. Now, let us in on how you think that African governments can improve on research and perhaps food security in their different countries.
Yeah, thank you, Sulaiman. Yeah, I'll speak a bit from my own experience, but I have some familiarity with what's happening in other countries in the continent. But the governments have been very slow in responding to this problem. For example, in South Africa, we have children in Africa generally, by the way. South Africa's got one of the highest rates of malnutrition that has had devastating effects on the health of the children. So we've got a two-pronged problem in a sense. We have to address the ill effects of malnutrition from the past, and we have to address the problem now so that our children can grow up healthily. For example, in our organization, we say for children, the future is now. This cliche that children are the future, they can't have a future if they don't have a now. So in the terms of what adds to the problem massively is the climate change. Just recently, a month ago, and now again, KZ in the Natal part of the eastern part of the country experienced huge floods as a result of rain. Now, the organization I belong to, stake in the government, has reported the government to the police for negligence. And this is our disaster management systems all over the continent, by the way, are not in place. Then what we also say, we need to up the social grants, and what we are calling for, even on the continent, is for a universal basic income grant. Now we have the climate change and we have the massive inequalities, but also we have, like in Sudan, Mali, Ethiopia, we have internal wars. And then I must also take the opportunity to apologize for the xenophobia in our country towards what people from other parts of Africa. We've come to realize that we need to call for Africa is not a continent, it's now, we call it Africa is a country with a very rich diversity in languages, cultures, etc. We need to build on that. It's so unfortunate that we've got this xenophobia because some of us are saying, let's build a grassroots movement across the continent. We can begin to address these, including a movement for children and about and with children. Coming back to the solution, it's so huge, Sulaiman and others and the listeners, but I think we have agency. If governments don't come to the table, let us unite and address this problem together. I know our governments are involved in talks to bring about some unity in how we deal with this problem, but it's not really working.
I think, sorry again to cut you there, Marcus, you've raised quite an important point, which is for Africa as a continent to start looking at every other country, looking at the continent as one big country, irrespective of those very few in minority trying to bring about the hate and xenophobic, attitude in all of this. Let's bring Yinka here, the lady, to help us make sense of some of the key things she's already doing. She's a fruits and vegetable farmer in Nigeria. Yinka, well, apologies for that glitch in connecting to you earlier. Good to know that you're there. Listening to Marcus and Robert, some of the key things here, they're talking about, Marcos says, if the government is too slow to act, then the people, we Africans, shouldn't be too slow in fixing that gap. What are those things you think Africans can do to ensuring that the children first, and every other African is given some nutritious, diet coming from the earth?
Okay, thank you for your question and good evening. Sorry I didn't join you live. What I feel Africans can do is, hello?
Go ahead, I can hear you.
Okay. Food production in Africa is produced by rural farmers. 70% of food production is produced by rural farmers. And these rural farmers are using manual labor to work on the farm. So if for Africans to get back into the system because of the effect of the war and so many things that is happening, Africa needs to mechanize their farming system. When I'm talking of mechanization, it's not just about tractor, no. Mechanization is about having everything, including, the tractor and the tractor coupled implements that will make the work easier. As of today in Nigeria, you find out that nobody wants to go to the farm again. Nobody wants to cultivate. Nobody wants to till the soil. Nobody wants to produce food generally because the work is hectic. And that is why our production is very low. Then considering the effect of climate change, considering the effect of good agricultural practices, let me give you an example. I hope I'm not too fast.
No, go ahead.
Let me give you an example. A farmer in Nigeria will grow corn, and a farmer in Nigeria growing corn will be harvesting 1 ton, 2 tons per hectare. A farmer in other countries, in modernized countries, they will grow corn. On the same 1 hectare, they will be harvesting 10 tons, 7 tons, 21 tons. That is where we need to start from. It is not about having large acreage of land. It's about increasing the yield per hectare. For instance, if a farmer that is having 4 tons per hectare is competing with a farmer that is having 20 tons per hectare, and the price in the market, there will be challenges because the 4 tons per hectare will always remain poor. So one, we need to start with good agricultural practices, as in how do farmers increase their yield, as in increase yield per area, per land size. It's not about a farmer cultivating 100 hectares and the yield is just 2 tons. It's about a farmer cultivating 1 hectare and is getting 2 tons. It starts from good agricultural practices. Then we now look at climate change. That's the second point. When you talk about climate change, you see, in the olden days, our forefathers, when they plant a small space, they get maximal yield, as in the crops are plenty because the soil is rich in nutrients and so many other things. But nowadays, when you plant 10 hectares, you don't even get as much yield as the farmers, you don't get as much yield as our forefathers were getting on 1 hectare. So the comparison is too much. What causes this? Climate change. Rain is not falling as it used to fall before. The sun is hotter than before. There are so many things. How many farmers in Nigeria know that? In Nigeria, we have 2 types of farmers, 2 types of people that are producing food. We have the educated ones, we have the non-literate ones. Majority, like I said earlier, the non-literate ones carry 70 to 90% of food production. The 10% are the ones that get the others. And it is those 10% that have access to loans, that have access to grants, that have access to whatever it is, which they eventually divert into something else. Whereas the 90-70% are struggling on the farm. Let me give you an instance. Now, because of the war, sorry, I hope I'm not too far.
No, we can hear you.
Okay. Because of the war in Russia and other countries, we are importing. Nigeria imports wheat from Russia, from some other countries like that. Now they export it because they stop export now, so it means we cannot get wheat. So definitely there's possibility of the scarcity of food stores and everything. What stops us from producing in our home country? One, the type of wheat that is available the type of wheat, they said the wheat that they're growing in Russia cannot grow well in Nigeria. So what are the research institutes doing? Why can't they produce something that will fit Nigeria? Why are they there? So research institutes should work on that and get the wheat that will be suitable for our climate, for our whatever it is, so that farmers can
let me jump in here and bring in Robert before we go on the break. Robert, you've heard Yinka. She's raised 2 key points there. She looked at the effect of climate change to the extent that, and also that's also knowledge-based, because she also referenced farmers who would still think that some crops are seasonal. And she also now is trying to, talk more on how best technology can help African farmers. Now, looking at many African countries, they've had to depend on food aids for long months, especially during wars, which Yinka also referred. She just referenced the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Is there any other, some kind of aid that Africa should be getting at the moment to help shore up food production?
Yes, Sulaiman, there is aid which can be given to the farmers so that they can produce high-quality, nutritious foods. For example, the governments can adopt policies, agricultural policies, and economic policies which can be favorable to the farmers. The farmers will need policies on gender issues. We know that the most impacted people who till the soil in Africa are women, but the women are not called upon to join on the table during the decision making. So there is need to bring empowerment of women and also youth in the decision making about agriculture. Also, we have weather station technology. The farmers will need accurate and reliable weather forecasts and projections so that they can match that to the varieties of the crops which they are going to grow. And this is actually the issue of climate adaptation. The farmers also need assistance in terms of soil laboratories to be able to sample and measure the type of soils they have, the kind of fertility in those soils, and what kind of fertilizers or manure will be needed, and also match that to the varieties which they are going to grow. Now, looking at the certification, which has been discussed for 2 weeks in the COP15 meeting in Abidjan, just this month, it was noticed that a place like Chad is losing 4 kilometers per year to desertification. And that is why the continent, with the African Union, has identified the Green World Initiative to try and stop or slow down this desertification by planting belts of trees which are managed by the communities who are facilitated in terms of training, water provision, and seedling provision so that they can be able to combat the desertification.
Well, let me take a break. I'll come back. Let's take a moment off. I hope you don't lose your train of thoughts. When I come back, I'd like us to stretch it. You've already talked about climate adaptation, slowing down, desertification, and a few other things. When we come back, we'll be talking more on, how this can help the African, child who is the most affected in the world, with as many as 28 million children in sub-Saharan Africa suffering from stunted growth. That's another area I know Marcus will help us, to understand. That's when we return. Join us again. Well, if you just joined us, you're watching VSA here on News Center Television, broadcasting live to 54 African countries and beyond, and it's Africa Day. And we're talking about nutrition here, which is the big theme for the day. And still have with me here Marcus Sulaiman and Robert Mwaniki. Gentlemen, thanks for your time. Let's start with you. Marcos, other than food, the diets of these children at home, endemics and waterborne illnesses also cause a lot of challenges. In the course of working with the, caring for these children, African children, what are the basic, demands that you have had to contend with in ensuring that they have nutritious meal?
Well, I think especially with the climate change, what we've realized now, and that's why the whole approach is more sovereignty food production. What that means is we need to localize the food production, because food is more than just producing. There's a whole culture around how much food, etc., how the food supply and distribution is managed. So there needs to be, because there are so many changes in climate, etc., we need to begin, governments, communities take control of the food production. And so that food is localized, food production is localized, you produce. And I think I've just forgotten the lady's name. She mentioned that the issue of how governments then begin to take charge of that. But more importantly, and I think Robert mentioned the central role women play. They have a very good idea of what children need, the food. In fact, the point related to that is the huge negative effect the food the companies have on the nutrition, because the research has shown it's very unhealthy, very sugar-filled, and not needed for the growth of children. In fact, they've shown in their research that the big companies, through their advertising campaigns, have literally changed the eating habits of children. So I think the need for governments, we cannot, sorry, I just want to make the point. Markets cannot satisfy and feed our children. So the governments and communities need to begin to take charge of food control, food production. But companies, the government also needs to impose strict price control, because the food, through the high prices, actually deprive our people from the basic foods, even though they are poor quality. And I think that that is an important issue. And I think that we need to put more pressure on our governments, like that's what we are doing now. We've embarked on a right to food campaign, and we're asking the government, and we take into the Constitutional Court to say that governments implement their constitutional mandate that children have a right to food, including, by the way, children from other countries. South Africa is a signatory to the Convention of the Rights of Child. Any child within the borders, whether they from other countries on the continent, needs to be supplied with the basic food needs. So I think what we need is to begin to change our approach. Not food security. We can't depend on private companies to provide the food. We need to go back, and I think the lady mentioned that, to indigenous knowledge, so that the food is produced locally with indigenous knowledge and fed in a cultural environment, ensures that children do get the food they need. Let me stop there, and maybe Robert can also add.
Yeah, we'll come back to you quickly here, Robert. Some of the key concerns, as I listened to Marcos talking about, putting pressure on government. You recall the Maputo Protocol commitment and improvements in, agriculture, which stipulates that at least 10% of national budgetary resources must be put aside to agriculture. So far, not one African country has been able to do any. How can such pressure be brought to bear? More so now that the AU is having that conversation, and the AFDB just met also in Accra, Ghana. How can Africa make its leadership understand the importance of the Maputo Protocol on agriculture?
Thank you, Sulaiman. I agree, Africa has has abundance of resources. And indeed, there is no reason why children should be going hungry when there are resources all over, from Cape Town to Tripoli. What we need to do is we need a clear framework of cooperation between the governments, the NGOs, the communities, the people, so that they agree how to synergize who does what and who contributes and takes responsibility. Because we know the children have a right, a human right to nutrition. And this nutrition is available because we have the natural resources. For example, the universities we have in Africa should partner with research institutions and provide all the information and statistics required by farmers to be able to grow nutritive foods at all ecological zones. There are places where maize cannot grow, but maybe cowpeas can grow. There are places where we cannot grow beans, but maybe we can grow sorghum. We can grow millet. My fellow panelists mentioned about the traditional indigenous foods, which have grown since Africa, since ages and ages in Africa. Fruits are there in the world. We have fruits like Carissa eduris, which grow wildly. We have vegetables which grow wildly, which people just need to be taught in the communities how to harness. And the researchers can come in here and take samples and analyze the nutritive values of these traditional indigenous vegetables and fruits. Similarly, we should have proper zoning run by the government with the support from NGOs and communities. We should zone our countries to determine which area has competitive advantage for growing which crop. And that area should then be enabled to specialize in that crop. If it is maize, let it specialize with maize. Let another region specialize with beans. Let then this trade, which is now being facilitated through Africa Free Trade Association, be able to exchange this produce from one country to another, from one region to another. Let there be proper channels of distribution. We have countries where there is famine on one head of the country, for example, to the desert and Asal north of Kenya, there will be famine. But when you come down to the food basket areas where crops grow and the climate is very conducive, there is food which is rotting and going to waste. We talk of about 40% of the food getting wasted after post-harvest because of poor storage and preservation techniques. So we should be able to have the competitive advantage which has been endorsed by the government. And African Union can put this in place, working through this COP meetings we are having. We just had COP 15, Conference of Parties. We are going to have another one in Egypt, COP 27. We are going to have a COP in diversity. That can be the overall overarching framework. Then that is cascaded down to now the countries, the leadership of the ministries of agriculture, water, and food security. And then this can actually be activated throughout the communities, and the people can be able to get the food desired by the children and by the adults at the right time, the right quantities, and also the right nutrition value.
Let me bring in Yinka here again. And Yinka, well, again, apologies for the glitch at the back and forth in the connection to you. Weather patterns, because you also said something about climate adaptation, slowing down desertification, and both of you have also mentioned storage. Now, let's speak more about weather patterns and the levels of precipitation, which are some of the other challenges we've seen so far. So how can technology, we go back to technology, we really can't run away from it. How can technology be effectively designed to help increase yield and beat these natural changes in our environment?
Okay. No, thank you for the question. Say, how we can use technology is this. Let me give an example again. If I were to clear 1 hectare of land, if I'm using manual, it will take like 6 boys, 6 healthy boys. It will take them like 10 days, 20 days before they could finish uprooting, clearing. Sometimes they might use 1 month, a month to clear 1 hectare of land. 1 hectare of land is 2.5 acres. Now, if I were to have a machine, a bulldozer, if farmers have to have access to bulldozer to be able to clear 1 hectare, in a day, the bulldozer will clear 3 hectares of land. Can you see the difference? That's technology. If we were to plant rice manually, 10 farmers will be on 1 hectare or 1 acre and be struggling there for weeks. If with machineries that are available right there, but because farmers could not access it, they don't have the finance to do that. If the way technology can be brought in for them is, if the government or whoever should invest in those machineries, not only tractor, like I said, they are tractor coupled implements. You can't use tractor to plow, to till the land, and then be using manual hand to plant corn. Farmers, 99% of farmers are using manual to plant corn. It takes them 3 weeks to plant small acres. But if technology has to come in, the system will change. For instance, we are currently using, most farmers in the rural area, the 70% that are producing the food we are eating, most of them don't use soil nutrients for their soil. So the yields are always very low. But if the technology comes in, they will test the soil. If you test the soil, you know, okay, it needs nitrogen, it needs potassium, it needs this quantity. But I remember about 5 or 6 years ago, I wanted to test my farm. I need to send the soil to Kenya to go and do a test before they send it back to me in Nigeria. How many farmers can afford that? So these are where technology could help. Imagine I'm going to the farm, I want to produce 10 hectares. They already told me this place you need nitrogen, you need this there, you need this there. And another thing, the most important thing, is storage, preservation. You see, I was at a training about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and I saw a colleague from Jordan. He said they store fruits and vegetables, they store tomato for 1 year. As in, they could preserve fresh, not dried, not anything. They could preserve vegetables, tomatoes, for a year and it won't get spoiled. Now, look at the farmers here. We'll plant, and then when farmers don't see anybody to buy, they'll start selling it at a very cheap price, a giveaway price. How could they break even? How would that encourage the youth to go to the farm? When I see my father, my grandfather in the farm struggling, and he's not breaking even. But with technology, in those days, sorry, I used to go back to those days. In those days, in those era of Western culture or whatever culture, they have farm settlements. In each farm settlement are farmers with like 2 hectares, and they give them water, irrigation, they give them this. Let me give you an example. This year alone, rain has not fallen very well. On my home farm, I'm able to a bit raise irrigation system. For other farmers, their farms are getting bad because there's no rain, climate change effect. So if there's dams, functional dams, not just the one that we have dams that are not functional, as in no irrigation system, no way they can get water to it. Farmers in my community, in other communities, this 70% of farmers, they go on holiday during dry season because there's no water, there's no rainfall. Imagine in these centuries, we're still waiting for rain to farm. So these are technologies that could improve this. For instance, if there's dams, there's irrigation, farmers will plant all year round. Africa will be able to produce massively. But in all African countries, especially even in Nigeria, we don't have access to all those things. Now, don't tell me one farmer cannot afford it. 1, 2, 3 farmers cannot afford that because they are striving. They are not even breaking even. But if the government or investors or partners could come in, most especially government, they don't need to give them sprayer. You don't need to give them seed, but produce infrastructures that they will be able to use for life. If there's drip, if there's pivot irrigation, 100 farmers will stay around that area and they will be cultivating food. If there's storage preservation system, they know that if they produce this food, it's not that 100 farmers will produce and then the price will drop down.
Let me bring in Marcus. Marcus, listening to Yinka, I go back to one of the key points you raised now. For us to start seeing the continent as one country. It's very instructive there. So off the top of my head, I'm thinking, Marcos, what do you think of a general basket for the continent such that each country will have its contribution at different periods to help different countries facing drought, war, or any unforeseen challenges? So we're talking about having a one basket that every country will contribute into it, maybe perhaps have a big storage somewhere that can help the entire continent, looking at your points.
Yeah, Sulaiman, I think where I am right now in the context of many years of trying to address, we've arrived at the situation where, and this has been accelerated by the climate change, we're going to have, climate scientists have predicted big and long drought for Africa. So the traditional, we may have to go back, I want to come back to that, local farming, where people produce with their own energy, etc. Because the big floods traveling, in fact, we can't travel, transport. In fact, it's been one of the most negative consequences, a huge transport of food via the airplanes and whatever. It adds to the destruction of the climate, of the environment. So local farming with government support, of course, so that you can use local compost when the rain comes and you use it. When the rain doesn't come, farmers can then adapt and whatever. Because food, what we've discovered now, and it's always been like that. Food is not just about production, it's about the culture of what you eat, etc. But I think for us, and that's why I'm actually participating in these forums, we need our people within our own countries to come together, solidarity. All climate change people, scientists say, what is foremost needed is unity amongst people. For example, in the floods now in Natal, it was the unity support of the communities, your neighbor, but importantly, disaster management system, which will include food production, food storage, because food will not be available through the shops as we understand it. But also, and this is my last point actually, we need to take charge. We can't of our own food supplies. It cannot be through big companies that are making huge profits at the expense of people's needs and people's health.
And your closing moment with us, Robert, what's the place of insecurity in this conversation?
Sulaiman is right that Africa has challenges in terms of security. We have seen in West Africa, military coups are coming back. We have also seen in Sahel region a lot of insecurity and even attack by jihadists and killing of people and the threatening of farmers and creating an environment which can not allow instability for food production. We've also seen some countries faced with conflicts of all sorts, conflicts in Ethiopia between one community and another, conflicts in South Sudan, conflicts in Sudan, conflicts in many places in Africa. We need to put our hands together. In terms of security, we decide and let the government and the AU put a mechanism of nil tolerance to conflicts, nil tolerance to wars. Let all the people use diplomacy, let them use negotiation as a way of settling their conflicts. Because again, the children are the ones who suffer most when there are conflicts. It is the children, the women, and the youth who cannot go to school, who cannot go to work, who can not go to the farm. It's the children who get malnourished because of the conflicts. So we are now, many of the African countries are almost 50, 60 years after independence. Surely these people can be able to negotiate for peace, live together, where there are issues which are very deep. African Union can be able to send in negotiators and peacekeepers, like they did send peacekeepers and negotiators in Kenya during the 2008 post-election violence, and it was settled within a month. So we cannot condone, we cannot tolerate fights between one community and the other, or one country and the other, or any kind of conflict or war in Africa will be setting us backwards, many years backwards, because war destroys the infrastructure, it will destroy even the roads, it will destroy even the water canals, it will destroy even the water pipings. I want to add that when there is flooding, we should develop mega dams as part of our infrastructure, where this water can be contained and then used later for irrigation and for crop production.
Well, it's a fine place for us to leave it for today. I'm hoping that we can bring us all back to talk more about this. As you know, Marcus said, we must keep the conversation going. It's the only way to put pressure on government to ensure that the future of Africa is protected. I'd like to say thank you for being such a nice company. Robert Ndaru, Mwaniki, and of course Yinka Adewole and Marcus Sulaiman. Marcus, thank you for your time. We really would like to talk more and perhaps maybe someday that we have to celebrate the children, have some of the children from your resource center speak to us here on News Central Television. And to all those watching, yes, Marcus, you want to say something on that?
Yes, what we have been asked by the children to say, we really, and it's part of our agenda, a united movement of children across the continent. Thank you very much.
I will reach out to you and we must have that conversation here on the square. Many thanks, Marcus, and thank you, Africa, for watching. I'm Sulaiman. Bye-bye.